Hello, Garland Nixon here with the one and only Mark Sleboda, straight out of Moscow. We got plenty to talk about. Let's talk. Hello, we're talking to the one and only Mark Sleboda. He is an international relations and security analyst, former U.S. He's a U.S. Navy vet, former nuclear engineer. He is in Moscow. He's a journalist, and he's a just all around smart guy. Mark,
not a journalist. Not a journalist.
I consider you a journalist. So even if you don't consider yourself one, because you actually know how to write far better than these lunatics and fools that we call journalists. Read the Washington Post or the New York Times one day, and you'll realize you're a lot closer to being a journalist than these hacks. But Mark, where can people find all your non-journalism online?
Yeah, you can follow me at Elon Musk's Twitter X at Mark Sleboda1, and you can follow me on Telegram and Substack at The Real Politique with Mark Sleboda.
Mark, we have some complete lunatics on our hand. Here we go. The EU must win an arms race. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk has called for Europe to escalate its military buildup, claiming Russia will lose like the USSR. Macron, he's going to extend the gigantic, almost unmatched nuclear umbrella of France over the entire continent of Europe. With the exception of Russia. It'll be aimed at Russia, of course. And I'm sure the Russians are cowering in fear. The only problem he has is he can't actually walk out on the streets of Paris because the people of France hate his guts. For God's sake, these people are lunatics. But at least you got to worry about Poland, because Poland is going to win the arms race against the USSR. It's, I don't know what to say more. Mark Sleboda, make some sense of this for me, please.
Yeah, so, I mean, there's so much craziness going on, and it's, I mean, the whole week has just been nonstop political events, right? Of course, always driven to an extent by what's happening on the battlefield, but what's happening on the battlefield has almost become the background noise to the furor coming out of Washington, out of Brussels, out of Kiev. But I guess today the major news is coming out of Brussels, and the EU declared an emergency summit of European leaders. And for those of you who are willing to wade through the feces, Politico Europe is calling it a war summit. I kid you not, a war summit, right? And by that they don't mean, oh, we're supporting Ukraine. They're talking themselves, right? That's what they're talking at this point.
They're going to declare war on Trump, I think.
I think they're divided between declaring war on Trump and Russia. Most of them really see it as the same thing at this point, which just goes to show how far down, the cuckoo's nest they are. I mean, I don't know. Can I say this on YouTube? But
yes,
they've gone batshit insane. They've gone batshit insane. All right. And you raised a good question of whether they've become batshit insane or they're. It's just, and they've long been this way, or whether it's just no longer deniable that they are doing it in such a demonstrative way. So yeah, I mean the winner comments are probably coming from the Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk and the French President Macron. But von der Leyen, the head of the EU's president of the EU Council is right up there, right behind them as well. And I think we need to start with Macron, actually, because Macron made a speech where he has said that there will be no peace in Europe. He identified a Russian threat. Russia threatens France itself in cyberspace, in the air, and in the realm of ideas, or
the realm of ideas. Oh my God, that's the worst place to be threatened.
Yeah, something has become a threat to France and Europe. And he said that the only way peace will return to France and Europe is with a pacified Russia. A pacified Russia. I mean, the immediate response was Putin made a comment. Do you remember what happened to Napoleon? I mean,
yeah, like the Tsar didn't he like ride into Paris on his horse? Kind of leave once the Poland, I mean the Napoleon's army was defeated. I think the Tsar like led the victorious parade into Paris.
It's crazy. I mean, I know Macron thinks of himself. He just thinks that he is the most charming, most capable, most powerful politician in the world. I mean, it's a good question. I mean, if we're going to put up narcissists, if we put up Macron and Trump and Zelensky, I honestly don't know which one is.
Trump loses that. Trump loses that one in a blowout.
Well, at least you could say that Trump, being the president of the United States, with the mantle of the office, at least has some of the power to back that up.
Well, but and this, he had $1 billion company with like resorts all over the world. I'm not saying it was his billion, but this was $1 billion. You know, this was a huge company. He flew around with a 747 or whatever the old with big Trump words on. He had the Trump Hotel. You know, he had some semblance of an empire of his own before he didn't need to become president. He was Trump before president.
Yeah, Trump was a brand.
Exactly. So
gold lame, tacky, kitsch.
Exactly. So yeah, he's kind of got an excuse for the narcissism. These other schmucks, get out of here with your Macron, a banker who married his grandmother or something. Man, forget this guy.
It has to be said that Trump won a convincing election as president of the United States, and has the strong support of now some 50. Trump's approval ratings are looking pretty good. Macron, on the other hand, is despised on his own people and is only still in power because the majority of the vote went to either the Marine Le Pen's National Rally Party, the quote far right, or to Mélenchon's far left alliance. And because they're on either side and can't cooperate with each other, that kind of left Macron surviving, suspended between the two of them, and is still in power in France somehow. But the French people are resolutely against. He once again, along with Keir Starmer, wants to send troops to Ukraine. Something, and ostensibly once a ceasefire takes effect, as sometimes it's billed as peacekeeping forces. At other times, they've used this new woke terminology to refer to it as a reassurance force. What the is a reassurance force? I don't even know. I have no idea.
That's like something they say at the Oscars. That's the kind of stuff they say at the Oscars.
Now they're even saying they're not intending that these would be on the contact line, right? They would be hiding in West Ukraine. They would be a human tripwire force, right?
They'd be drinking at the bars in Lvov. That's the best they can do. They'd be drinking at the bars, guaranteed.
So, but I mean, to use language like this, that Russia must be pacified. I mean, that's practically a declaration of war. I mean, that is, you're talking about the country that has the largest nuclear arsenal in the world, and right now they might have the largest conventional military in the world. They certainly have the largest. They certainly have the most experienced in modern peer-on-peer drone, everything combat. I mean, without the U.S. to back them up. I mean, France and the U.K., the terrible twosome here, they want to send 30,000 troops to Ukraine as a security guarantee for the Kiev regime. But they say that in order to do this, they need a security guarantee from the United States for their troops. What they call
well, let me read this to you, Mark. I got some breaking news, kind of breaking. The LNC Palace confirmed yesterday that Macron plans to travel to Washington together with Starmer and Zelensky. The plan is that President Macron will once again travel to Washington together with Zelensky, and the British Prime Minister, French government spokesman, said without announcing any dates. Macron himself said Wednesday he will confer with European allies on the idea of using France as nuclear deterrent. You heard all of that crap. So now they've come to Trump, and Trump says no. They come back to Trump. Hey, we need a back. No. So then they meet. Meanwhile, Trump is going in the other direction. He's now said there's 240,000 Ukrainians that they allowed in, and gave them special status as immigrants. Trump says, revoking it, I'm deporting all of them. So they're getting deported. So they're coming to ask this guy for a backstop. And he's like, get out of here, stinking Ukrainian. Get out of here. He's sick of it. He's up to here. I think they're going to end up getting punched or something.
It is really amazing. All right, so Macron and then Starmer and then Zelensky came to Washington, right? Last week.
Mo Curly
and now they want to come again. I mean, how many times can Trump tell them no? I mean, does Trump have to learn French? And I mean.
No,
I guess he would have to learn Russian, because we know that Zelensky really doesn't speak Ukrainian very well. I mean, Russian is his native language, and I don't know. Does he need to speak blue blood or something to communicate effectively with Keir Starmer? I don't know. You would think English, but he doesn't seem to get it through his head. I don't know. I mean, is there some new, novel, interesting way that they can grovel and do submission before Trump that they think will convince him this time? I don't know. I really, they don't. There's all of Europe at this point, right? And I think this, continuing to do the same thing again and again, right? The definition of madness is just further symptom that the Europeans are delusional. They're still living in a la-la land that the United States emerged from with the Trump administration, amazingly enough, with the Trump administration coming to power. And I mean, this was said outright by Pete Hegseth and echoed by Mark Rubio. What we're talking here is not Russian talking points, right? Or the Russian narrative. We're talking reality. I mean, this is realism. We're recognizing the reality of the situation, what the situation on the battlefield is, and what capabilities we have that could change that. And we can't, right? So they recognize that. So they want to secure a settlement, a peace deal on the best terms that they can possibly get for the Kiev regime now, and for the U.S., must be said. Of course. Because as this goes on, it's only going to get worse. It's not going to get better, right? And Trump said this himself. I mean, they said this. No future, Mike Waltz said this actually, no future, current or future military aid package is going to put Ukraine in a better position, right? Because Russia keeps getting stronger and stronger and stronger. How many times do we need to be reminded by no less a person than the NATO Secretary General, Mark Rutte, that Russia is outproducing all of NATO put together, including the United States, in the type of weapons and munitions needed for this conflict by 3 times. 3 times. Get it through your head. You're not going to win this one. Now, von der Leyen has announced a plan, right? They've got a new cunning plan. She wants to spend something like 840 billion euros, I believe, rearming Europe, right? You know, most of it to be invested, I suppose, in the
broomsticks,
rebuilding the military industrial complex. Whether you're talking the German military, the British military, the French military, I mean, all you have to do is type that and a internal assessment or report, right? And they will show you, they themselves talk about what a sorry state, what a deteriorated state each one of these 3 militaries, supposedly the premier militaries of Europe. Although, to be perfectly honest, the Polish military is certainly in ground forces superior to any of them. I mean, there's really no question there. And they're actually spending a not huge, but a considerable portion of their GDP, their budget on their military, and their military will get stronger in the next few years because they are also buying lots of weapons from South Korea. They're buying equivalent. They're buying HIMARS. They're buying South Korean equivalent of HIMARS. They're building tanks. All of these sorts of things. They're building quietly, but it's still going to take years. And what she's talking, first of all, this 840 billion euros. Where are they going to get this 840 billion euros from? Debt. They say it right out. Debt, more debt, right? Each one of the European countries, with the exception of Germany, who is almost there and is only not there because it was in their constitution, but each one of their economies is already, the governments are in debt more than 100% of GDP. In some of their cases, considerably more. And Germany intends to remove restrictions on spending now on military stuff so that they can go over 100% of GDP in debt. This is all debt. They're going to put all of their people even further into the hawk, the future generations. And here's going to be always the problem with the EU and investing in their military industrial complex, because the bang they get for the buck, the euro, is a fraction. Why? Because their military industrial complex is spread out and splintered among all their respective little different countries who have all their unique, sovereign weapon systems and pork, right? That it goes to their own military industrial complex, produced in relatively small numbers and with very limited ability to use these weapons in any type of really cooperative way with other NATO members. We were long told about NATO standard 155 millimeter artillery rounds, right? There's one thing that we discovered during the Ukraine conflict is those NATO standard 155 millimeter artillery rounds aren't that standard. And that most of them can't be used interchangeably with each other's artillery systems, because although they're 155 millimeters, the differences are still significant enough that most of them can't be used in each other's artillery pieces. This is why Europe is splintered and will never be a great power, will never be a military power. And they're talking openly. They want an arms race with Russia, right? That is, with the presumption right here, Russia must be pacified, right? Or Donald Tusk, the Polish president, he echoed, he said, let's see here. What did he say? He was commenting on the state of the what he sees as a Cold War or as a new arms race with Russia, because that's what they are all talking about. And he said, Europe as a whole is truly capable of winning any confrontation, financial, economic, military, and Russian. We are simply stronger. We just need to start believing it.
We just need to believe we're stronger. That's all they need.
Can you please cue, I believe I can fly? Right. This is ludicrous. And the splintered military industrial complex, first of all of any investment they do get will take years and years to show any results, right? Once they start investing it. And even if this conflict goes on for a while longer, which they obviously intend for it to do so, it will take years, well past that, to have any effect on this conflict. I mean, it is just, it is a fantasy. They are living in a fantasy land. They are not going to be a military great power. I mean, they're having to work around, because first of all of their countries don't even agree, right? I mean, Orban in Hungary and Robert Fico in Slovakia want nothing to do with any of this. Orban says he's okay with increasing Europe's defensive capacity. He's on board with that, but not more aid to Ukraine, not a continuation of this conflict. But I believe that on there's probably several levels, right? Because they always justify these things with more than one level or more than one reason when politicians do something. It's never just one reason. But one of the reasons they are making such a noise and presenting to Trump their peace plan now, trying to make a show that they're on board with him or they're speaking his language, about putting British and French and other European troops as peacekeepers on the ground. They know very well that Russia won't accept that, right? Russia says it again and again and again, right? It's not that they're not listening. It's they're saying this because they know Russia won't agree to this, right? So if they manage to convince Trump to make this part of, the peace negotiation settlement demands from himself and the rest of the West, if they get on board behind him on this, is that Russia will say no and the war will continue, which is what they want. They don't want, right now, the only one who wants a ceasefire and peace as things stand is Trump. No one else does, right? Russia doesn't, because they're winning, right? And they can't, they know that the West won't agree to their terms. And at this point, they're starting to think, you know what? This is never going to end unless we purge this regime, root and branch out of Kiev and possibly Lvov even. They're looking big now, all right, because they see no possibility of this ending. They hear the Europeans talking like this and they're like, oh my God, we can't leave Ukraine to just be armed and prepped again. So we have to fight this again in another few years. So Russia is not ready Russia says no ceasefire, and they're not ready for peace on any terms that the West can accept, including, I believe, the United States. But who knows? Because Donald Trump has floored me with some of the things he's done. So maybe he would be willing to accept the Russian terms. I don't know. But the Kiev regime doesn't want peace because they don't accept, right, anything, right? They're still set on, they're even more, Zelensky is even more delusional than Europe, the European leaders, right? We heard, and you don't have to talk to us, right? Just refer to what the Western mainstream media says that his own officials in his own regime say about him, right? We're already going on 2 years now since Simon Schuster interviewed Ukrainian officials for Time magazine, right? And they said Zelensky is delusional, that you can't tell him anything about the real state of the conflict, and that he is an emperor with no clothes, right? Not me, right? I mean, I certainly agree with that, but that's according to his own officials speaking to a reporter from Time magazine. And this week, Der Spiegel put out a piece, the German political magazine, Der Spiegel, one of the top publication in Germany. They also did an interview with some of Zelensky's own officials, and they said he has the mentality of a child, of a spoiled child who throws tantrums. The mentality of a child, right? Boom. I mean, so you don't even need to listen to Russian propaganda on this. The Western mainstream media usually admits all of these things, right? It just gets buried and it never is allowed to change the narrative, right? It's always buried somewhere in Article 15 and some back page or buried somewhere online. But they've admitted all of these things. They at some point they just don't let it change the narrative, and they're operating according to the narrative. So he refuses to accept any concessions to Russia, much less what Russia is actually demanding. And Europe obviously doesn't want peace, right? They do not accept losing to Russia. It challenges their identity. How could they lose? Europe is the shining, the other shining city on the hill. They've fully bought into the idea of US exceptionalism. They just express it as Western exceptionalism. They believe that they are structurally, societally, and morally superior to everyone else in the world, right? The garden and the jungle, as Joseph Borrell told us, echoing the U.S. arch neocon Robert Kagan. They believe all this. They can't lose to Russia. All right, they would then fall under the sway of Russia as a dominant great power, particularly if the U.S. is really intent on pivoting away from Europe towards Asia, right? And they first of all, they don't want that. Certainly not under the terms that it's happening. And they just can't accept losing to Russia. It challenges their most basic beliefs about who and what they are, and who and what Russia is, and their respective places in the world. So they are obviously, no, that's not saying that the European people are on board with this as a whole, right? But we're talking foreign policy, so that doesn't always really matter, right? Because like in the United States, most of the time Europeans don't vote according to foreign policy, right? They vote according to domestic issues, like most people, right? Most people in most countries, most times and places. And a lot of these officials, von der Leyen, whoever elected her, she was never elected. I mean, she never had to convince constituents or something like this. So they feel very confident in pushing a new, arms race, a new cold hot war with Russia, and they're openly talking now about beating Russia militarily, about pacifying Russia. And I mean, I don't know how many times Russia has seen this historically. I mean, back to, Charles of Sweden, Napoleon, Hitler, right? And
Crimean War, on and on.
The Crimean War. Who are these people? Macron? Right? Starmer? I mean, you're not even in the same historical league. Get over yourselves.
Here's something. Yeah. Here's an interesting Okay, Fox News is reporting the U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, U.S. Envoy Steve Witkoff, and White House National Security Advisor Mike Waltz will head to Riyadh on March 11th to meet with Ukrainian officials, including Ukrainian Chief of Staff Andrei Yermak. I don't see Yermak. I don't see Zelensky's name. And I also think this. Now, they're coming, Zelensky, Starmer, Macron are coming to meet with Trump. Here's the other part of it. Because they've told Zelensky, you need to make up with Trump. I think it may not be just that they're coming there to throw them their latest, oh, you've got to be the backstop for us and give us security guarantees. I think it's also they feel that they're going to make up, Zelensky, they're going to come in there. And while he won't say he's sorry, because he's never going to say that, at least maybe they can find a way to patch things up with Trump, which they can't. But, it's, again, the delusion of them. But so now, March 11th, Ukrainian officials in Riyadh. Your thoughts? I mean, these people, they're going to go there with the same old stuff. We've got a plan. Read it. And they're going to say, but this is a plan you keep giving us over and over, where the Russians have to, throw in the towel. I think they're just, they're going to try to, they want the weapons to start flowing heavy again and all that stuff. And they're just going to try to say, what do we need to say?
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, it is significant. Not only has the U.S. Stopped the flow of weapons now, right? Not only are they not making any new weapons packages, but they actually stopped the shipment of weapons that were ordered, right, from the U.S. military-industrial complex during the Biden administration, right? They actually stopped them en route. They made planes turn around. They've also now shut off the flow of U.S. intelligence to the Kiev regime. And a lot of people really, really underestimate the value that this has and the importance that this has had in keeping the Kiev regime afloat for the last 3 years, right? And able to defend and strike back against Russia. Now, there's an open question about this, right? There's different sources saying what level, what degree of intelligence is blocked. Some people say it's all of it. Some people say it's just offensive, right? Preventing intelligence that is not being provided, preventing any long-range strikes, something like that. And then we have other sources, including Politico, saying that the Europeans, the Trump administration has an intelligence sharing network that is particularly intelligence sharing, particularly strong with the Five Eyes global spying cabal, right? The 5 English-speaking countries, right? Which is the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, New Zealand, and Australia. And they told the United Kingdom that they aren't allowed to share intelligence in the on the conflict with Ukraine. And they basically said outright, the British and French both said, we're going to share everything with the Ukrainians anyway. We don't care, right? They outright said, we have assets on the ground and the information will be passed to them. And, what are they going to do about it? So they basically said this. So, but it's still, even if they're getting most of the same intelligence, there will obviously be a greater delay and some obstruction. And I believe it will still have some effect, right? Even if they're not getting completely cut off from intelligence. The U.S. satellite data primarily is what we're talking there. But also a lot of NATO reconnaissance data going on over the Black Sea and the Baltic Sea. That's not affected either, except for specifically U.S. Aircraft involved in that. And every day there are NATO aircraft doing circles in the Black Sea and the Baltic Sea. Every day, several ships, right? Constantly, collecting as much information that they can, signals intelligence and other information to pass on to the Kiev regime. We also have reports from on the ground, and take these for what they are, as reports, although it's also starting to be discussed in the Western mainstream media, that Starlink, that the Kiev regime forces use of Starlink is experiencing, quote unquote, rolling blackouts, right? And they're not talking about Russian jamming, because Russia has demonstrated the ability to at least locally jam Starlink. And Starlink has been absolutely essential to allow the Kiev regime to conduct military communications, because Russia's electronic warfare was blocking it in the beginning of the conflict almost completely. And it also, for instance, allows them to fly their drones, right? Most of their drones are flown through Starlink. So that will be a major impediment for them as well, even if it continues to be on, facing interruption and things like that. But it does tell us that the Trump administration is at least serious about using this leverage to force the Ukrainians to start negotiations. Now, whether that is when Trump turns the spigot of weapons and intelligence and communications back on, right? We don't know. We really, no one knows what's going on in Trump's head. And if anyone tells you that they do, I'll tell you they're lying. I am giving up on predicting what Trump is going to do, because I don't have a good track record in it. Not that I think that anyone necessarily does have a better track record. But he's too unpredictable, which is exactly what Russia, what Putin said, that Kamala Harris is predictable. In this particular case, right now, the unpredictability is working in Russia's advantage. Not so much for the people in Gaza or China or somewhere else, right? That's the nature of the beast.
But, the thing about it is you did, because you referred to him as a chaos bomb.
Yeah, chaos bomb.
Now, and my position with him was, I don't pay any attention to what he says. I'd be like, same thing. I've given up on predicting. I just watch what he does and tries to figure out. Or if I'm going to, when he says something like, Gaza's bombing everybody if they don't do what I want. And then today we find out that that his people are meeting with Hamas, which is unthinkable in the United States. So I'm like this. Either I ignore it or I say, well, he's probably going to do the opposite. But I'm never going to look at what he says and try to judge based on anything that he shared. That in no way implies anything, because I don't know if he really thinks that. And like 5 minutes later, he just changes his mind and says, I think I'll do something else. Or if that's intent, who knows anymore.
Because 2 weeks ago, he called Zelensky a dictator. And I was like floored. I'm making so many reassessments on that, right? I'm like, you can't just walk. I said, you can't just walk that back. The U.S. president has correctly identified him as a dictator. And what did he say in the last week? A dictator, asked it by a journalist. Did I say Zelensky was a dictator? I don't remember saying that. Next question. I'm like, oh my God.
Only Trump. Oh, but you know what it is? He just keeps the people going like, what? He just keeps everybody doing that. And
he's got me doing it. So,
for whatever reason, it works for him. It worked for him. Oh, I hope they televise the meeting with with Macron and Starmer and Zelensky.
They won't do that. They absolutely will not do that again. I'm quite sure that they will not want any type of possibility of a repeat of the fracas in the White House, right? The battle of the Oval Office. They absolutely will not want that. I mean, there might be a staged presser, right, afterwards or something like that if it happens. But I really don't know what they think they're going to get that they haven't gotten already. I mean, I know that Trump, do they think that Trump is really interested in this minerals deal? Or because I think that this was all a red herring. I think Trump knows that, Ukraine doesn't really have that much that's worth that much, and that it would require, more than a decade of investment to get anything profitable. And Russia already controls much of that wealth anyway. This was part of a political game that was being played, and they're trying to bill it now that Trump viewed that as some type of informal security guarantee, right? But the idea was that, if U.S. workers were on the ground, then Russia wouldn't dare to invade Ukraine again. Well, I mean, why are we talking again? Because as far as I'm concerned, the SMO is still going, and Russia's given no suggestion they have any intention of even slowing it down, much less stopping it. All right. In fact, they're going to accelerate it. Almost certainly look for big offensives in the next couple months. But
add this. It was only supposed to happen after a peace agreement anyway. So in theory, if it was going to happen after a peace agreement, that would mean that Russia had signed it, which would mean they got what they want. So that wouldn't be relative anyway.
Yeah. Well, this is the way some of the Trump people were presenting it. Some of the Trump administration were presenting it, talking to the press in the aftermath of this, saying that the Trump White House viewed this as a test, since this security guarantee would only even conceivably come into effect once there actually was a peace. Then that was a test, right? So you'll get an informal security guarantee, but only once we actually have peace on the ground, right? That would allow the U.S. to come in and exploit the hell out of whatever they could vampirize out of Ukraine, right? So they view that's the way they're spinning it now. That seems plausible, right? Because nothing about this deal ever made sense to me. And again, this is unconfirmed, but there are Ukrainian media outlets, particularly in Telegram, which has a little bit more freedom outside of the unified information policy of the Zelensky regime. But Resident UA, one of their better, generally patriotic but willing to be critical Telegram channels, and a few other sources have been suggesting that actually Zelensky already signed away all these minerals to the United Kingdom as part of this 100-year security guarantee that Keir Starmer supposedly signed with them. Okay, so first of all, let's point out the ludicrous of this, right? He promised 100 years of security guarantee to Ukraine. At the same time, he's demanding a security guarantee from the United States for his forces so he can provide a security guarantee to Ukraine. It's like yes minister stuff, right? I mean, if you've ever seen the old British political comedy, unfortunately you can't make that today, because it would really be called for in this particular and many other similar situations. But if that's true, that might explain a lot of the intrigue that is going on here. And they pointed out that, of course, U.S. intelligence would have known this and would have told the Trump administration. In this case, maybe Trump was giving them all enough rope to hang themselves and still may, right? Who knows?
Maybe yanking the Brits chain a little bit too.
What I will say is what it is clear to me. I feel no doubt in saying there is far more political intrigue behind this minerals deal than on the face of it, right? It is not just Trump and greed and getting some money and giving or not giving something in return. There is some type of political intrigue going on here, whether it's really about security guarantees, peace negotiations, or whether it was already promised to the British and the Trump administration is just waiting for the right time to, for them to hang themselves on it. We don't know. We don't know. That part of it at least is unconfirmed.
RT across the top of their thing, they're in red. It says Washington reportedly seeks replacement for Zelensky, right?
Yeah.
So now I would say this. I don't need a little red, at RT, they put the little red like lightning bolt there. I don't need a little red lightning bolt to know that. I think I could have told you that after that meeting. Now the word is they're talking to other people, be it Poroshenko or people are talking about some of the other people who would be totally unacceptable to Russia anyway. But
they would all be. They're all unacceptable.
Exactly.
They're all Maidan people. Right.
Exactly.
So who are they talking about? This is interesting. Politico is reporting this. Supposedly, the U.S. is reaching out to Poroshenko, right? The Candy oligarch, the former president of the Kiev regime, whom Zelensky in a sham election, whatever, but Poroshenko was wiped out, right? Because the Ukrainian people were so desperate for a change, and particularly East Ukrainians voted for. If they did vote, a lot of them didn't vote, but those that did vote, they voted for Zelensky because they believed that he would bring peace, because that's kind of what he campaigned on, right? He never said how he would bring peace, right? All of the nationalists, they all voted for Poroshenko or some other crazy little candidate, right? Because he was seen as the West Ukrainian supporter. So Poroshenko, they're talking to Poroshenko, which is, you're going to go back to the guy that Zelensky beat soundly, and he became an ultra nationalist himself. So I'm not sure that benefits. Timoshenko, the gas princess, the oligarch who got rich by buying Russian gas and then at discounts and then reselling it elsewhere, and stealing a lot of the gas too, it must be said. She was the prime minister of Ukraine under the Orange Revolution, and her star has faded. She's supported, politically, even in the last decade, by particularly older people in North and Central Ukraine, particularly pensioners, for some reason, gravitated onto her. But that would be a real stretch. And while Russia has dealt with her before, I know, and she is a political, evidently somehow she finagled an invitation to Trump's inauguration. She was there. Zelensky couldn't get an invitation, but somehow she was, which I find interesting. But obviously, she's she's always intriguing. She intrigues like so she breathes. So there's another possibility. The Maidan leader who has became then the mayor of Kiev and has ever been Vitaly Klitschko, right? He is within the Maidan regime a critic of Zelensky, has called him a dictator. But only because he took power away from the rest of the Maidan forces. Taking it away from all of East Ukraine, that's fine, right? Banning all those parties, that's fine. But, taking power, consolidating power away from the other Maidan parties, that wasn't cool. Anyway, he's not the sharpest tool in the shed. Even Victoria Nuland, when her and Jeffrey Piat, the U.S. ambassador back in 2014, were caught on tape deciding who the next prime minister would be, and the Europeans were interested in Klitschko, and Victoria Nuland's like, no, he's on training wheels. Yatsenyuk, who was their man for the next prime minister, and let him, earn his training wheels, and so I don't think he's regarded any more seriously now. That's who the U.S. And I saw another reference that they might be talking to Budanov, right? Kirilo, I like the dark Budanov, the sociopathic head of Ukrainian military intelligence, who was groomed and brought up to that position by U.S. intelligence. He's a fanatic, an anti-Russian hating fanatic. He certainly wouldn't be any more amenable in peace negotiations. And then you have the figure of Zelensky. And interestingly, Politico doesn't bring up that the administration is talking to Zelensky, right? Even though he's usually presented as the other figure who would be more popular with the Ukrainian population, right? And my argument was, if you put Zelensky on a ballot with a blind, deaf, and dumb donkey, right, the Ukrainian people would vote for the blind, deaf, and dumb donkey over Zelensky. But Zelensky is a Banderite fascist. He is a true believer. He had 2 busts of Bandera and one of Shukovich and the big red and black flag in his military office when he was heading the Ukrainian military. And he's come out in the past. He's been floating around this Brussels summit and some previous meetings, and he's outright said Trump is destroying the world order, right? So I seriously doubt that the Trump administration is looking at him as an alternative leader for Ukraine. That's why his name is not being mentioned. If you're wondering why Zelensky, the Europeans might love Zelensky, right? He might be their man now, right? But all of that is how. Because Zelensky is refusing elections. The Rada has passed a bill saying there won't be any elections during wartime, and we stand. They had to pass it on the second vote because in the first vote they voted against it. But he made them vote again until they gave him the right answer.
Wow. And so here we sit with the Russians must be thinking, was it Voltaire who said my only prayer was to make my enemies fools, and the prayer was granted. I think that's I think that's what they got to be looking at. Let me ask you this, last but not least, before we run out the door, what's happening on the ground in the battlefield, Mark?
Okay, so it's a mixed story. The Kiev regime has launched some big counteroffensives that's not being reported on widely at all, not in the alt media, not even in the mainstream media. Toretsk, which Russia had taken, right, really effectively over a month ago, and then it was finally reported. But the Kiev regime has, in the recent days, sent forces, big counteroffensive, obviously timed with information warfare in mind, with the summit in Brussels and the visit to the U.S. in mind. And they've seized, by some accounts, 15% of the city back, and they're trying to dig in and drive the Russians back further. They also launched a big, I don't want to say counteroffensive, but counterattacks south of Pokrovsk as well, trying to prevent the noose from being drawn around their necks. Now, they're having some success with these things, right? Now, I will point out that they have launched counterattacks before. They don't have the ability. These are not going to last. They are part of the ebb and flow of battle, and all of the resources that the Kiev regime is wasting on these counterattacks is, in the medium term, only going to hurt them, right? Some short-term information headlines, oh, we've still got a piece of Toretsk, haha, you didn't take it. But they're wasting a huge amount of resources in the process. And it's been written about in U.S. Military journals how the Russians have a habit of deliberately sometimes falling back in the face of such counterattacks in order to lure them in. Now, I don't know if that's the position or not, or whether Russia just was neglecting the Toretsk area, having all but taken Toretsk itself, and then neglected to keep enough forces in the face of a counterattack, and the Kiev regime identified a temporary weakness, and Russia will have to redistribute forces to take it back. It may take some time. It's a little embarrassing, but this is part of the ebb and flow of battle. This is not some sea change in what is happening in the conflict. It's annoying, right? It's, shall we say, a little embarrassing. It's like what the Kursk incursion was, right? But we can all see now that the Kursk incursion has cost the Kiev regime so much in terms of men and equipment and manpower, right? All of these forces would be better spent in defensive positions than in counterattacks. But Zelensky has a eternal habit of demanding military action for political reasons, something that the Russian government has never done at least not since the first few months of the war, right? After the fiasco of the Istanbul communique and Russia withdrawing troops from around Kiev, and everything is part of that deal, and then the Ukrainians saying, "Ha ha, no peace," right? We mobilized. We now have a much larger military. We're getting all the U.S. military equipment. Anyway, since then, Russia, the military decisions are left to the generals. The Russian military does not make decisions in their strategy or tactics based on some date, some meeting, some artificial timetable. Putin doesn't interfere, right? And he's made that perfectly clear. And I've heard nothing to, everything says that that's what's happening. But the Kiev regime does the opposite. And this is wasted counterattacks that aren't going to change the ultimate course of the battle, either in that particular area or in the long-term conflict made for political reasons. And that is, again, Russians are quite happy with Zelensky as the leader, because when he makes these things, he's helping them attrit ultimately he's helping them attrit the Kiev regime's military capability away faster.
And politically speaking, anytime he wants to go visit Donald Trump, the Russians will probably put the bill for his plane ticket. Go see him again. Have a talk with the guy. They're probably thrilled to see well, as would be more appropriate, Larry, Moe, and Curly, Macron, Zelensky, and Starmer heading back, because I mean, these guys, I just can't imagine that anybody could screw anything up any worse than these clowns going back to. I just cannot imagine, after everything that's happened, that they're like, "Hey, I got a great idea. Let's take Zelensky. We'll go back to DC and we'll meet." But it makes as much sense as everything else. What the hell?
Anyway, where Russia is having offensives and success on the battlefield right now is Zaporozhye, up the south. They're tightening the noose in the Kursk region around that Suja salient that Zelensky is still trying to keep open and failing. And very quietly, there's a pretty significant Russian. What?
How many the Suja salient? How many, if they end up forming a cauldron, as the term we always say, how many troops are in that area that would probably be? Do they know?
Yeah, somewhere between 10 and 20,000. 10 and 20,000, right? I mean, they'll try to get out.
They're effectively cut off now, aren't they?
Yeah, their only real supply line is one road, and that's under complete Russian drone and artillery control at the moment. They're in a really bad situation, and the weather is really warm. It's all above zero in Ukraine and that part of Russia right now, and it's mud. Right, it's all mud, so you can't do anything off-road. It's all got to be on road, so that's really inhibiting them there. The other one that no one's talking about is Russia's begun a pretty significant offensive in the Kharkov region, on the other side of the Oskol River, towards Kupiansk and Liman, and they're making really rapid progress there. And you could see things happen in Kupiansk and Liman a lot faster. Right, Russia withdrew from this area because the Kiev regime mobilized and they didn't have the manpower, so they just pulled out of it back in the autumn of 2022, right? If people who remember that, it was billed as a Kiev regime victory. Not really. It was more about maneuver and manpower, and the Russians withdrew in good order. But now they're back again, and they're going to take Kupiansk and Liman a lot faster than a lot of people think, and that's going to facilitate this move on Slavyansk and Kramatorsk from the north.
Yeah, well, the Russians better watch out, because before you know it, there could be European troops showing up with sharpened broomsticks. Yeah, somebody could get an eye put out, man. Somebody get their eyes poked with one of those things. It's
all of this is happening. All of this intrigue and noise and everything in DC and Brussels and Kiev, and the Russian military just keeps doing what they're doing. Stay the course.
Yeah, maintain course and speed, as we say in the boating world. All right, Mark. Well, once again, before we go, where can everybody find all your good works?
At Elon Musk's Twitter X at Mark Sleboda 1, and on Substack and Telegram at The Real Politique with Mark Sleboda.
Thanks a lot, Mark. And thanks a lot, everybody. Make sure that you do a number of things. Number one, most importantly, share this on all your social media platforms. Listen to this, Mark. There's 1,292 people watching right now. That means we should have 1,293 posts. I'm just hoping another one drops in. Additionally, we should have that many likes. And everybody, if you haven't subscribed, subscribe here and follow Mark's great stuff. And if you can afford it, you see, buy me a coffee and Patreon if you can afford it. If not, it doesn't matter. Just share it on all your social media platforms. Thanks a lot, Mark. We are out.